which spoken about the ultimate achievement is to bring about perfection within ourselves. That's considered achievement. And that's the purpose of our existence. And I quoted yesterday the Ramchal in his work, Mesilas Yesharim, Path of the Just, that God gave us mediums to be able to achieve, to bring about that perfection. What are those mediums? The mitzvos, because that sanctifies us, that spiritualizes us. And the ultimate medium is the study of Torah. That's the ultimate medium. That's the all-encompassing mechanism which raises us and spiritualizes us and allows us to achieve perfection. So now the intellect is explaining to the soul. There's a very fundamental introduction which is necessary. And this is a question which is asked. God created man imperfect, put him in a state of challenges, and if we succeed, we achieve perfection. If not, then not only don't we achieve perfection, we have regression. Well, if his intent is that man, the human being, or this being, should be the ultimate beneficiary of his goodness, he should have created just the soul in a spiritual setting, and the soul should be exposed to God's presence and should actually sit and benefit from the radiance of God, if that's the ultimate goodness. What does God have to put man through this, create him imperfect, that he should be the creator of his own perfection with all the struggles? If the ultimate is that man should be the beneficiary of shleimus, of perfection, only to enable you to be a beneficiary of God's perfection. Create man perfect, and man will be a beneficiary of the perfection, of God's perfection. That's the question. Then he asks another question. One of the appellations for God is Shakai. It's one of the unpronounceable names. So we say Shakai rather than with the Dalet. What is the meaning of Shakai? Each appellation of God has a certain connotation and has a certain innate value. Shakai means Shakochodai, meaning if God is infinite, so when he unleashes his power, the power has the ability to keep going, bordering on the infinite, unlimited. But yet, because God created a world which is finite, and it's tailored based on the ultimate benefit of the human being, everything in existence, God had to so-called restrain that power, that the power should only manifest itself up to a point, not beyond that point. I'll give you an example. The ocean, the power of the ocean is enormous. But yet the way God created the world, the ocean comes in with a ferocity, and at the seashore, it breaks and becomes docile. It's like God created the world, which is a demonstration of God. Despite this unlimited power, he reigns in on it and doesn't let it go beyond a certain point. Creation is God unleashing energy's power. That power manifests itself into exactly what God wants it to manifest itself. But the human being should be multiples of what he is, intellect-wise, physical-wise, capability-wise, every-wise. The world should be a different world. But yet, it's very specific, very limited, and within that context limitation, we function. That itself is the expression of Shekochodai. He was able to rein in on that power and said, up to this point, not beyond that point. Why? Because for us to be in this imperfect state is in the best interest of man, not for the human being to be created perfectly. Because he says, if you have a master, Rembrandt, or you have a sculptor who's a master in his area of development, is he in any way going to create something, anything less that reflects his ability of being a master? Whether it's a painter, whether it's a metal worker, a goldsmith, or whether it's a sculptor. always the end product is an expression of the creator of that, whatever that is. It's an expression of his genius. So if God himself is infinite and perfect on the absolute level, why did he create such an imperfect being and allows the being to be imperfect to be able to achieve his own level of perfection? It's counterintelligent. It's contrary to the intelligence. If you say God is that, why does he create something imperfect if every craftsman always creates something which is an expression of what he is? So man should be perfect, bordering on the absolute level, but he's not. We're far from perfect. We're created in a very imperfect state. And all the perfection we have to achieve, it's self-created through our own initiatives. Why? That's the other question he asks. Firstly, the first question is, why did he create a perfect being? Secondly, if God is, which he is, perfect at the absolute level, and his power is infinite, he should have created a being which is close to the infinite. And why did he create the human being and the world to be so deficient or so limited, and it's only man is able to bring him to the person to another level? Let's talk. We had mentioned the Rambam in the Laws of Tshuva writes that every person can be as great as Moshe Rabbeinu. So we asked, how's that possible? Moshe Rabbeinu was the greatest Jew who ever walked the face of the earth. He was the most humble man who ever walked the face of the earth. He's the one who went to heaven to bring the Torah down to the Jewish people. He was the Redeemer of Israel. God openly spoke to him in a wake state. Do you think one day we're going to wake up and that's who we're going to be? Not possible. So what does it mean that every Jew could be as great as Moshe Rabbeinu? What does that mean? It means that what was Moshe Rabbeinu's level of achievement? He was endowed with a potential. He had a capacity. He met that potential to its fullest. You cannot be more than who you're meant to be. So if we are an infinitesimal aspect of Moshe Rabbeinu, but as small as that may be, but if we achieve what we can and we can't do more, we've succeeded no less than Moshe Rabbeinu. That's the meaning. God doesn't demand for you more than you're able to achieve. So my potential is one and not a million. He doesn't expect you to accomplish more than one. All your ladder that you have to scale is one. It's not a million rungs. If that's the case, I scale the ladder with one rung, that's sufficient, because you can't do more than that. Because you're only endowed with the ability based on what your capability is, what your potential is. Because that is the purpose of existence. But whatever we are, whether with the one or the million, create us with the one. You're perfect in that. I'll give you an example. You build a building, and the building needs a certain kind of brick. Measures, it's made to specification. The brick is small, 100-story building. The brick is tiny compared to what the building is. But the brick made to specification has to meet the specification. It's the perfect brick which meets the criteria of building such a building. But you have girders, you have steel beams, which are endlessly larger than the brick. The girder has its purpose, the steel reinforcement has its purpose, and the brick has its purpose. Its makeup, its shape, its density, whatever it may be, but it is what it's supposed to be. The girder, the steel beam, the iron beam, which is supposed to hold so much weight and so many support certain things, or the concrete, the quality of the concrete has to be a certain quality to be able to hold up such a skyscraper. Has to meet those criteria. Otherwise, eventually it crumbles. That's what happens. It's identical with us. Every soul is created efficiently, and it's given the capacity to achieve its perfection. But if God could create that soul perfect, why not? There's nothing beyond God's ability, especially God is perfect on the absolute level. How does a master such as God create anything which is imperfect? These are the two questions he's addressing right now. Now, how do we establish that God is perfect on the absolute level? So the easy way to say it is because, if we go, as I mentioned yesterday, you go back to Sinai, and the Jews prophesied in a wake state, and God showed the Jews that in existence, the terrestrial, the celestial, everything, nothing exists in power outside of himself. He wills everything. So that means if he wills everything, and the reason why everything exists only because it emanates from his willing it, he is perfect on the absolute level. There's nothing exists outside of him. That's how we know. But besides that, if you look at the symmetry and how everything fits perfectly in existence and how everything functions and complements one another, that's the indication that there's one master orchestrating everything. And everything complements everything else. Like the body, different organs, different limbs, each one accommodates the other, complements one another. The systems that exist, whether it's the circulatory system, nervous system, the lung, heart, various parts of the body, the kidneys, everything is a component of the body to accommodate and allow the other component to function properly. Kidney filters the blood, so the blood can be oxygenated. The lungs are this, the heart is that, the brain is something else. There's certain secretions, which the brain gives orders that the body creates certain secretions, certain chemicals. It's unbelievable. But the body works in sync with itself. It's one body, it's one person. Identically, just as the body has different components and parts to it, and everything complements one another to create the functional body, which is one entity, which has so many systems going on simultaneously, but it's one identically. God wills existence, although they're disparate parts. You have the plant kingdom, you have the inanimate, you have the human being, you have the speaking species, you have so many things going on, but everything complements everything, and it's one master who wills it all, and it all comes together. That's the understanding. But after everything said and done, the human being's far from perfect, capacity-wise. The Talmud tells us that the strength of Shimshon, of Samson, Shimshon Agib was the strongest human being that ever lived. No human being ever lived who was as strong as Samson. He had strength which bordered on the supernatural. It was a reflection of God's power. That's what it was. There was only one Samson. But that just gives you an inkling and understanding of who God is. It's like not to be believed. A person is able to walk and pick up the gates of a city, which could be a half a mile wide. He has that power to lift it up. That was Shimshon Agibor. And many other things. So he says something interesting. We had said that even the greatest angel, because the angel is finite, cannot fathom the infinite. So they understand who God is, that there's nothing comparable to God. But to fully grasp who God is, to know his essence, no creation can know his essence. It's not possible because infinite cannot be fathomed or comprehended by something which is finite. We said the ultimate reward is perfection, and we're able to achieve that level of association and relationship to bask in God's radiance. But even when we attach to him, the level of benefit, we know we're benefiting from the infinite. God allows us to experience that goodness as if we're benefiting from the infinite. But do we have an understanding of it? We don't have an understanding of it. Because to understand it, you have to understand infinite, which you can't understand infinite. I'll give you an example. There's a certain pharmaceutical which is created, which heals every conceivable disease, and it creates an immunity in advance that you're not susceptible to any disease or any breakdown in the immune system. To create this kind of drug, you need more than human intelligence. You have to have divine intelligence. But if you're a scientist or a pharmacologist, and you analyze it in a lab, and you see the genius that went in there, you say, this is divine genius. This is infinite genius. Do you understand what it is? What that you don't understand, but you understand within the realm of genius, even divine genius, this is beyond divine genius. So when we have benefit from God, although we're not able to fathom God because he's infinite, but the degree of experience, of pleasure we have, it's understood that this pleasure is emanating from an infinite source. So we cannot grasp or fathom infinite, but the experience, it's so intensely positive, we understand it comes from an infinite source, unlimited source, which is the creator himself. Ourselves, we think about, like I spoke about, we cannot visualize a million miles. We spoke about the Hubble telescope coming back with pictures of 1 million miles of space dust. It's a lot of dust, a lot of distance. Could we even fathom what 1 million miles are? We can't even fathom it. And space is beyond that. And existence is finite. So although we can't fathom that, but in our minds, we have an understanding what 1 million miles is. Although visually speaking, you can't visualize it. And we, as they say, you can't get our heads around it. But we understand what that is. The same thing. We can't understand infinite, but we know infinite is beyond, means without limit. That we do know. When you have pleasure and you experience it in the spiritual realm, which is where the soul basks in God's radiance, the soul cannot fathom who God is. But when it experiences that radiance based on its own level of perfection, it has a semblance of understanding of who God is. Because that kind of benefit and goodness cannot come unless it comes from that level of source, which is infinite. That's the understanding. We find that when Yosef interpreted the dreams of Pharaoh, within moments, he said, the 7 fat cows, the 7 emaciated cows, the stalks with the wheat, full kernels, wind-blown kernels, 7 years of famine, 7 years of plenty, 7 years of famine, so on and so forth. And immediately gives a solution exactly how to deal with it. They should gather all the grain, one oversees everything to store it, so on and so forth, and have a responsibility to distribute it, and so on and so forth. And that will preserve and save the country from perishing. Within moments, he gives them this interpretation and solution. Pharaoh was the monarch of the most advanced civilization in the world. When he saw this Yosef in action and his evaluation interpretation, how to deal with the problem, what did he say to his courtiers? These were statesmen, world statesmen. He says, have you ever seen anyone with the spirit of God in him? This genius, Pharaoh saw a lot of smart people. He himself was a very astute monarch. He was the leader of the most advanced civilization. I'm not talking about a bunch of pygmies. And he says, when he hears Yosef and he's exposed to his genius, he says, this is nothing less than divine. Because he says, in terms of experience, he knows what's around, what's out there. This goes beyond, this transcends human genius. This emanates from unlimited genius. That's what he said, Ruch Elokimbo. The spirit of God is within him. This is godliness. This is not finite, something we figure out. This is an endowment. The Rav Shach once said, Rav Shach, Zichron Livrocha, blessed memory, passed away at the 107. Although we say that the person who supports Torah has full credit as the one who studies the Torah, because without the support, the one who studies not able to support, he's a full partner. Rav Shach says, it may be true, but he says, pleasure-wise, he says the richest man in the world does not experience the pleasure of his physical world. You could have 25 Rolls Royces, mansions, outfitted with every amenity, the most sophisticated, whatever it is, the most hedonistic lifestyle. All these people, all the pleasure they have, don't come to the experience that he has when he studies Torah. The pleasure he has when he studies Torah, when he has a difficult Rambam that he works on for weeks, and then all of a sudden he's able to come to resolve it and have an understanding, the level of euphoria, the level of joy that he has in existence, there's no joy compared to that. No joy. What does that mean? People have joy. They experience pleasure. What happens when the pleasure ends? You know what happens? There's a certain melancholy which sets in. Because if you can't maintain that, that means you've come down. You can't wait till the next experience, or maybe even outdoing the previous experience of joy. When you experience joy within the spiritual realm we're talking about, that uplift, that infusion of feeling stays with you, and you just add to it. You don't regress on that. So he says, therefore, no person in this world who has more money, endless money, doesn't even know what to do with it. Or even the one who sports Torah, he may get credit for it, but the actual pleasure that he has from the study, the way the Torah touches you, nothing can touch you the way Torah touches you. You know, it's interesting, you know, you have to be a little bit of an intellectual to appreciate intellectual elucidation. The times, sometimes I teach, and a number of the students, they have the most advanced educations, whether it's Harvard, Stanford, whatever it is. We're talking about PhDs and the top in the game. So they've been exposed and interacted with people who are high on the intellectual scale. And sometimes I ask a question when we study in depth, and in a moment I give an answer because of the difficulty of the question, and I give the answer, which to me it's clear. God put the answer in my mind. It gives you a level of satisfaction. And I say to them, with all your knowledge and all that you've taught and all the different horizons you've come upon, have you ever been touched as this moment when you have this understanding? And they all agree. Nobody disagrees. It's one of a kind of understanding. It touches you differently than anything else. It's a different reality. Because that touches, that has to do with your soul. That touches your experience, something which has relevance to the infinite. You know, the Talmud tells us, speaks about the four most beautiful women who ever existed. Sarah Imenu, Sarah, our matriarch, Rachel, Rachel, this Abigail was the wife of David. And listen, 4 or 5 women. So the commentators ask, but there's one woman who outpaced them all in beauty. That was Chava, the wife of Adam that God created for Adam. It says She was the most beautiful woman who ever lived. And comparing any beauty to her is like comparing a monkey to a human being. That's the difference between the beauty of Chava and the beauty of even the most beautiful women. So why isn't she listed as one of the most beautiful ever, or the most beautiful woman who ever walked the face of the earth? So Tosfos, who's the commentator, answers, who was Chava? Chava was created by God. She wasn't born of human birth. She's God's handiwork. You know what it means? The creator created a person. What product, what creation does the creator create? That means this came about directly through the creation of the infant being. Therefore, when you rate beauty, it's not rated. You can't rate it because it's understood that's that. When we speak about beauty, we speak beauty within the realm of beauty that we could have relevance to, that's born through natural birth. But when God creates, it's understood. There's nothing compared to that. I always say, Rembrandt paints a sunrise, a sunset. As breathtaking as may be, at best, he's replicating a semblance of what that sunset is and what that sunrise is. You can't equal God himself. The beauty of it in real time, nothing compared to it. Why? Because the sunset, sunrise, that's God doing it. Everything else is only a reflection, at best, of that. It's a semblance of that, at best. You know, if you ever saw pictures, films of the tsunami in Indonesia, in the Far East, tsunamis, it's unbelievable. You see the ocean coming in and the height of that water and the surge, you can't outrun it. That's how quickly it comes in. It's not to be believed. The power of nature, it's not to be believed. And if you believe in God, you say, this is God causing this to happen. But versus God, what does it mean? It means nothing. This is God's power. God willing nature to behave and act in this manner. In a moment, it comes in and goes out. It's like nothing ever existed. After the ocean recedes back into where it's supposed to be. But nobody's shaken up. Nobody's impressed. It's amazing. No, I subscribe to the National Geographic. I got a pile 6 feet high in my bedroom. Anybody who wants to come to visit my home and he wants this whittled away his time, he can read National Geographic. You'll see the volcano, you see the tsunami, you'll see the typhoon, and you'll see the tidal wave. And you'll see the Aborigines. And you'll see the this, and you'll see that. So there's so many different kinds of things going on in this world. How does God handle so much? If you notice, it's all meaningless. It's all meaningless. Now, ignorance is bliss. If you don't know what's going on out there, there's nothing to be impressed with. But if you see what it is, then there's what's impressive. You know, you say a man's worth $100 billion. So you say, look, if I have $100 billion in my bank account, I also be worth $100 billion. It's no big deal, right? If I could open the account and I had $100 billion to put in it, I'd be worth $100 billion he's worth. But you don't get it. Do you think this came out of a vacuum? How did he create that $100 billion? When you begin understanding how that was accumulated, created, now that is what to be impressed. It's not what you can do with it. When you have it, it's no big deal. And even then you have no what to do with it. But how did it happen? How did it happen? You have things going on 24/7, 365 days a year for the past 20 years. Endless employees, endless machinery, coordinating endless thing throughout the globe. That's amazing. But if you don't know that's the background, see, he has what I don't have. But if he shifted it to my account, I'd also have the 100 billion. You know, you talk like a buffoon. You talk like a fool. So that's ignorance is foolish. It's bliss. You don't begin getting it. People behave the way they behave, with the arrogance, with the insolence, with the brazenness, because they believe that when they do the deal, automatically they got the profit. No. The reason why they succeed is because God wants them to succeed. And that's part of their challenge. You find people which are endlessly more brilliant than this person. He was his actually professor when he earned his MBA. And the professor can't pay his rent. And this guy, his student, is his landlord. You understand? So this has to do with brilliance, understanding how to do the deal. Well, you realize I have a certain charisma. I have certain connections. He doesn't have those connections. Look, you can write the script the way you want. Bottom line, in one moment you can lose. All of a sudden he loses it all. What happened? What happened to your charisma? What happened to your connections? What happened to your aggressiveness? What happened to everything? Well, you realize Alzheimer's is setting in, dementia is setting in. He's fully there. He can pitch the ball accurately, and if he's at home plate, he can hit that ball. He's not suffering dementia and Alzheimer. What happened? Well, I guess my luck went sour. What are you talking about? So where are you today? Where's your arrogance? Where's your pompousness? Why aren't you flexing your muscle now? All of a sudden, your muscle of arrogance atrophied. You got to read the script. You got to evaluate the terrain. What's out there? And how long is it out there? New York City, before the corona, you walk down the streets, bustling, thriving, people. All of a sudden, we had the pandemic. The streets it was like a ghost town. No cars on the road, this and that. Everybody is sequestered in their homes with their faces covered. People are hiding under rocks. What happened? We could all be victims of this. We got to go into hiding. What happened? What took the oxygen out of our lives? What happened to it? Before that, you jetted around the world, jet setting, wherever you want to go. Within 24 hours, there was no way you couldn't go. All of a sudden now, they don't let you out of the country. They won't let you into another country. They won't let you out of the city. There's a gas shortage. I don't care what kind of car you have. If you don't have gasoline to put in your car's going nowhere. So again, everything is so artificial. It's so fickle. But people don't wake up. Everybody's in the groove. We play the game when we hear the song. As long as the music's playing, the person is dancing. That's it. And the person is frolicking. And the person is ecstatic. And he's singing his own praises, and he wants other people to sing his praises. That's the reality of life. People have short memories. It may happen to the other person, it's not going to happen to him. And what happens to him? All of a sudden, he doesn't remember how brazen he was. Things get better, he's right back. He's driving that brazen operation.